New Orleans, Louisiana in 1918 was one of the most unique and vibrant cities in America. A city unlike any other, where French and Spanish and African and American cultures had blended together over centuries to create something completely original. A city of ornate iron balconies and narrow cobblestone streets, of incredible food and music and art. A city where jazz was born, where the nights were warm and the music never stopped. It was a city that knew how to celebrate life. But in the spring of 1918, something dark began moving through the streets of New Orleans. Something that would turn those warm, vibrant nights into nights of terror. A killer so brazen and so theatrical that he would become one of the most bizarre and chilling figures in American criminal history. The city would come to know him simply as the Axeman, and what he did to New Orleans over the next 18 months has never been forgotten. The attacks began in May 1918. Joseph Maggio and his wife Catherine were found brutally murdered in their home. Both had been attacked with an axe while they slept. A panel had been chiseled out of the back door, allowing the killer to enter the house silently in the night. The axe used in the attack belonged to Joseph Maggio himself. It had been taken from his property and used against him, then carefully cleaned and left at the scene. This detail would become the Axeman's signature. He always used the victim's own axe. He always entered through a chiseled door panel, and he always struck in the dead of night while his victims slept. The police had no suspects, no witnesses, no motive, just 2 dead bodies and a cleaned axe left behind like a calling card. It was the beginning of a reign of terror that would last for 18 months and leave New Orleans paralyzed with fear. Over the following months, the Axeman struck again and again. Louis Bessumer and his companion were attacked in June 1918. Both survived but were severely injured. A pregnant woman named Mrs. Schneider was attacked in August. She survived and later gave birth to a healthy child but remembered nothing of the attack. Pauline and Mary Brunner were attacked in August. Pauline died. Mary survived. Joseph Romano was attacked in August and died 2 days later. His 2 nieces witnessed the killer escaping through their window, describing a large, dark figure wearing a dark suit and hat. Each attack followed the same pattern. Chiseled door panel, victim's own axe, middle of the night, and each time the killer vanished completely, leaving no fingerprints, no footprints, and no witnesses who could identify him. The police were completely baffled, and the people of New Orleans were terrified. And then in March 1919, something extraordinary happened. A letter arrived at the offices of the New Orleans Times-Picayune newspaper. It was signed by the Axeman himself. The letter was written in a theatrical, almost playful tone that sent chills down the spine of everyone who read it. The writer claimed to be a demon from the hottest hell. He taunted the police for their failure to catch him. He promised to continue his attacks. And then he made an announcement that was so bizarre and so theatrical that it seemed almost impossible to believe. He announced that on the night of Tuesday, March 19, 1919, he would once again pass over New Orleans. But he would spare any home that had jazz music playing loudly inside it at midnight. He was giving the entire city a chance to save themselves. All they had to do was play jazz. The letter caused an immediate sensation. Newspapers across New Orleans and then across the entire country picked up the story. People debated furiously whether the letter was genuine or a hoax, whether the Axeman would really spare homes with jazz music, or whether this was simply the ravings of a madman. Jazz musicians in New Orleans immediately began writing songs about the Axeman. One song called The Mysterious Axemans, jazz became an instant hit. Music stores reported they had sold out of sheet music. People who had never played a musical instrument in their lives were suddenly buying instruments. The city was gripped by a combination of terror and dark humor that was entirely unique to New Orleans. And as the night of March 19th approached, the entire city held its breath. On the night of Tuesday, March 19, 1919, New Orleans did something it had never done before and has never done since. Every single home in the city blazed with light and music. Jazz poured from every window and every doorway. Clubs and bars that were normally closed on Tuesday nights threw open their doors and played until dawn. People who lived in the same neighborhoods as previous victims played their gramophones at full volume. Neighbors gathered together in each other's homes playing instruments and singing. The entire city of New Orleans turned the Axeman's threat into the most surreal jazz concert in history. And that night, nobody was attacked. Whether it was because the Axeman kept his word or simply because nobody in New Orleans was sleeping that night, nobody can say. But the city survived, and the legend of the Axeman grew even larger. New Orleans police were under enormous pressure to catch the Axeman. Detectives worked around the clock following every lead. Suspects were brought in and questioned. The Italian-American community in New Orleans was particularly targeted by investigators who suspected the attacks might be connected to organized crime. Some theorized the Axeman was a mafia enforcer targeting Italian grocers who refused to buy from mob suppliers. Others believed he was a serial killer motivated purely by the thrill of the attacks. Some investigators thought the jazz letter was a red herring designed to throw police off the track. But every lead eventually hit a dead end. The Axeman left almost no physical evidence. He seemed to know exactly how to avoid detection, and despite the best efforts of the New Orleans Police Department, he was never identified. Over the years, several suspects have been proposed for the Axeman killings. Joseph Mumford was a convicted criminal who was in prison during the periods when the attacks stopped and free during the periods when they occurred. He was eventually shot and killed in Los Angeles in 1921 by the widow of one of the Axeman's victims. She claimed he was the Axeman. She was convicted of murder and served 3 years in prison. But no evidence was ever produced to definitively prove that Mumford was the Axeman. Other suspects have been proposed over the years based on circumstantial evidence, but none have ever been proven. The identity of the Axeman of New Orleans remains officially unknown. One of the most theatrical and terrifying serial killers in American history, and nobody knows who he was. The last confirmed attack attributed to the Axeman occurred in October 1919. Mike Pepitone was murdered in his home, while his wife and children slept in the next room. His wife heard sounds and discovered her husband dying from axe wounds. She reported seeing a figure escaping through the window. It was the last time the Axeman struck. After October 1919, the attacks simply stopped. No explanation, no final letter, no dramatic conclusion. The Axeman of New Orleans simply disappeared as mysteriously as he had appeared. Whether he died, was imprisoned for another crime, moved to another city, or simply decided to stop, nobody knows. The case was never officially solved, and the city of New Orleans was left with nothing but unanswered questions and the memory of 18 months of terror. The Axeman of New Orleans was never caught, never identified, never brought to justice. He killed at least 6 people and injured many more over 18 months of attacks that terrorized one of America's most beloved cities. He taunted police with theatrical letters. He turned his own killing spree into a jazz concert. He operated with a confidence and a brazenness that suggested someone who genuinely believed he would never be caught. And he was right. To this day, the identity of the Axeman of New Orleans remains one of the great unsolved mysteries of American true crime. His victims deserved justice. The people of New Orleans deserved answers, and more than 100 years later, neither has been delivered. The Axeman walked into the darkness of a New Orleans night in October 1919, and he never came back, and nobody knows where he went. At least 6 people killed, many more injured, an entire city terrorized for 18 months. Jazz music played desperately through the night to keep a killer away, and not one arrest, not one conviction, not one answer. The Axeman of New Orleans is one of the most chilling and theatrical killers in American history, a man who turned murder into performance art, who made an entire city dance to his tune. Literally. If this story chilled you, please subscribe to Echoes of the Dead, because every single week we uncover the darkest and most forgotten true crime cases in history. The victims deserve to be remembered. The cases deserve to be told. And this channel will never stop telling them.